Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about how to sharpen your chisels for cheap. Having a couple good chisels or more ideally when you're doing, any kind of woodwork is kind of important, and they're very useful, but not if they're dull. So it's important that you're able to sharpen them properly. Now the problem is water stones and stuff like that, they're expensive. So what I'm going to show you today is a more inexpensive option, something that's worked well for me. I do have water stones. I've got some nice equipment for sharpening, and I like using it on a brand new plane and stuff like that. But this works perfectly fine, and it doesn't involve you having to pick up a whole bunch of really high grit sandpaper and mess around gluing it to super flat surfaces and stuff like that, and replacing it when it gets screwed up because you accidentally took the wrong angle and you gouged it. So what I'm using today is just this real simple 4-in-1 diamond stone. It's a big brick basically. It's got 4 different grits of diamond stones. It's relatively cheap because they're relatively thin, but it doesn't matter because this stuff really doesn't wear out. And it's got this thing to hold it and keep it steady. It's got rubber on the bottom. Keep it steady when you're actually doing your sharpening, so you don't need to find something to put it in. So you just stick this in here and you're basically good to go. I'm going to put a link to one of these in the description like I usually do. It's contained within that Amazon link, so if you're looking for one, check it out there. You can pick it up. Keep in mind that anything you purchase out of there, I do get, I think, a absolutely minute percentage. So if you don't like me and you don't want me to get that, just look it up and pick it up through something else. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do one of these now. I'm going to sharpen my big chisel because this is the one that I use the most. It's the most stable. It's got the most contact area. But of course, you can sharpen any kind of flat implement on this. You won't be sharpening gouges on this, except maybe the outside round if you're very skilled, but any flat chisel you can. I'm going to bring the camera in closer. We'll talk about how this gets done and get to it. So we've got very coarse, fine, and very fine here. My chisel is actually quite sharp already, but could use a touch-up. I could start with fine based on how sharp this is, but I'm going to start with coarse. If you've got something that really needs some work, you start with very coarse. Step 1 here, we got to lubricate this so the thing will slide properly and so that the metal shavings that come off the chisel are going to help us out. So I'm just going to use some Windex. Windex is very slippery. It works great if you ever get a ring stuck on your finger, by the way. Very slippery and works really well for this. This isn't a water stone, so you don't have to use water. It's not an oil stone because oil stones are awful, in my opinion. What I'm going to do is start with the flat side and just go ahead. And you notice I'm holding this with like as many fingers as I can, getting lots of contact, making sure that it's on there nice and flat. And this is the easy part. I'm just going to flatten out this side. Okay? Not that it wasn't already flat. Now you'll notice there's some black stuff that comes off. You might be tempted to clean that off of your stone. Don't. That will help it work quicker. Now, if you feel the top when you do this, the part that you haven't been working on, you should feel a slight edge. If you don't, keep going a little bit. And what's going to happen is a little bit of metal is going to curl up from the bottom over the top. Once that's happened, it's time to go in from the other side and take that off. And we do this a couple times on each of the stones. So here you have to be careful. There are guides. I don't use one ever. I just make sure I've got good contact there. So I start lower, angle it up until I feel the contact, get a bunch of fingers on there like I said. Takes a little bit of practice, so don't be discouraged if the first couple times that you do this you have some difficulty. You can check by looking at this beveled edge and seeing where stuff's standing away to make sure that you're holding it at the right angle. If you're holding it at too steep an angle, you'll notice that things are only going to come away right at the bottom edge there. If you're holding it too shallow, you'll get something going on right on the corner on the top here. So you want to try and take off material evenly from that edge if at all possible. And then at the end of the process, we can put a little micro bevel if we want. Okay, so I've just done the top. Now I've got my little wire edge on the bottom, and I'm just gonna pull a couple times. Not push, just pull. I'm gonna do the same thing for the top. And just remove that so I don't feel that wire edge anymore. All right, now that's gonna be pretty sharp as it is, but that was coarse. Now it's time to move on. Make sure you read them. I just about moved on to very coarse there. That would have been less than ideal. Okay. So now we're going to do fine. And not surprisingly, this ends up being a repeat of the same process. So we've moved on to our fine one. I generally start on the flat edge, not the beveled one, because it is easier. Lots of contact points, touching basically as much of this chisel as I possibly can when I do this, just to make sure that I've got as much control as possible. Now it's pretty easy to control on this flat side, but when we move to the bevel, that's when it becomes important. That's when you want to make sure that you've got a few fingers on there and you're really controlling the angle, so you're not changing angles all the time and creating a big round in the top of your chisel. To be clear, a rounded top on this bevel is not the end of the world. You can still get a nice sharp chisel with that, but it's really not the goal, not what we're going for. It changes the angle and you end up with more of a high angle chisel a little bit at the end there, which is not quite the same thing, not as easy to cut with. All right, occasionally you'll want to add a little bit of your Windex on there to make sure that this all stays lubricated. But again, you don't want to clean off all of the fine metal dust and shavings that are on there, because they're going to help speed up this process just like they do on a Waterstone. All right, so I get to the end, and again, I go in and pull a few times, almost as though I'm stropping, to just kind of make sure that I'm taking off that wire edge and leaving this thing ready to move on to my next grit. So we finish off this process with very fine. This stone, this diamond stone, which is actually not really a stone, it's metal, is really smooth, all right? And this shouldn't take very long, and it should sound different. You should be able to hopefully tell. It sounds a lot smoother. There's a lot less gripping going on. Okay, and this is going to get us pretty close to like a mirror polish when all's said and done. It's going to look very shiny, and that's kind of the indicator that it's smoothed out all the way and ready to go. So you'll end up with a nice polished looking surface. Again, this last grit, as you go through the grits, they shouldn't really take as long. Sometimes I like to take my time with the fine one because it just feels nice. I like working with it, and I want to make sure that I get out all those other scratches from the other grits, but there's not as much work to do when you get to this stage. So it should be pretty quick. Okay, so now you've witnessed the whole process at this point as far as the stones go. There's one little trick at the end that helps us make sure that we're as sharp as we can be, and that is stropping. Now for the stropping process, we've got a couple options. Option one, and arguably the best, you pick yourself up a strop, get your proper sharpening compound on there on one side, you leave the other side blank. And what you would do is pull, never push, just pull so that the blade is facing away. And on this side with the compound, you can put a little pressure on when you do that, and that'll just kind of help finish sharpening it up. And then on the other side, very gently, give it a couple pulls on each side, kind of like you would if you've ever sharpened a straight razor. Okay, so that is option one. Option two, make your own strop. Get yourself a nice piece of hardwood, hopefully, that's you know, if you've got some scrap kicking around, you do that, make sure that one side is perfectly level, and then glue on an old belt. I've done that before. I use the same compound, works great, no problems there. I did, however, say that I was going to keep this as cheap as possible, which brings us to option 3. Option 3 is a piece of cardboard. Funny how that works, hey? Grab yourself a piece of cardboard and some metal polish. You're going to do the same type of thing here. You're going to use both sides of the cardboard for different purposes. Side one, you're going to put some of this metal polish on because this stuff has just a tiny bit of grit, a lot like that sharpening compound does. And you're going to coat one side of your cardboard in the polish. Cardboard has a little bit of clay in it, so in and of itself, it can act as a strop. What we're going to do is strop the one side with a little bit of force like we did with that green compound. That'll be the side that has the polish. Okay? Make sure you're holding this in a way that makes sense, and be careful because your chisel is going to be real sharp at this point. So we strop one side that way and then clean it off because it's going to have some polish on it. Then we flip our cardboard over and we strop the other side gently on just the raw cardboard. And there we have our sharp chisel. Let me show you what it looks like now. Now that is one bloody sharp chisel. Not bad, right? Look at the shine on that. And now I look ridiculous because part of my arm is bald, but what can you do? As always, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video and found that helpful. If you're gonna be getting some chisels, being able to sharpen them is very important. Like I said, I'm gonna put this guy in the description below. I will also probably add some polish in there and a couple chisels that I like to work with. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.